It is my pleasure to welcome Alan Lake, class of 1984, graduate back to Cincinnati. One of America's leading music journalists, Alan has written several books and is a frequent contributor to the New York Times and the Rolling Stone magazine. He's a columnist for MSN.com and a member of the nominating committee for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Alan's most recent book, The Holy or the Broken, Leonard Cohen, Jeff Buckley, and the Unlikely Ascent of Hallelujah, traces a song's journey from cult obscurity to international anthem to becoming a popular selection for weddings, funerals, and American Idol. Alan's previous book, My Cross to Bear, Greg Allman's memoir that Alan co-wrote, is being made into a movie. Alan, your fellow Country Day Indians are proud that you have returned home to visit the tribe. You'll be proud to know your alma mater is strong and healthy. Enrollment is robust. We're improving the campus with new and renovated facilities. Our graduating class has distinguished itself. 1/3 of the class received national merit recognition, and our college matriculation list is the envy of the city. Alan, thank you for joining us today. It is a privilege to welcome you back to Cincinnati.
Hello, everybody. I'm not used to this kind of Vegas stand-up routine here. This is not the usual. I may stand behind here just to feel less ridiculous. Thank you all for coming out. I know that you really just wanted to come check out the room, but I'll take, I'll take whatever spillover stays to hear me talk. I'm delighted to be in Cincinnati. I'm delighted to be in the shadow of the ballpark. My son will be very excited to see the Joe Nuxall Way street sign, and thrilled that all of you came out. Especially, I'm glad everybody's here. I'm especially glad for the class of '84 that is here. Class of '83, '85, all the people that I actually knew. Is really great to see all of you. And I'm going to talk for a little while and talk about the stuff that I've done and some of these recent projects, and then am much more eager to take questions and see what you actually want to talk about, rather than what I want to talk about. I guess to start, as Rob mentioned, the most recent project for me was this book about the song Hallelujah. And it was kind of a wild ride, spending a couple of years thinking about one song and seeing if I could pull off a high wire act of actually making a book sustain about the journey of one song. But I think that the thing that was most gratifying to me in doing this project, it's so easy now to be really cynical about music and its standing in the world, and to feel like it's not as good as it used to be. People don't care about it like they used to. It's this really cheap commodity that's kind of everywhere but doesn't mean anything to anybody. It's what I get hammered with every day trying to cover this stuff. Sales are down and everybody's stealing and nobody cares and pop stars are terrible. All of which, are true to one degree or another. And all of which is kind of always true to one degree or another. They're always terrible pop stars. That's not, it was Donny Osmond or it was NSYNC, or so now it's Bieber. Like, that's not the apocalypse, and it's really okay. But to go and talk to people about this song and to hear the ways that they used it in their lives, and the way that Hallelujah was so important to them that they used it at their wedding, or they used it at family funerals or in religious services, to see what it is that music still means to people, still can mean, that there is a power that it has that is unlike anything else, and then when people are at those emotional crossroads in their lives, this is what they turn to. That was so important for me to hear, and sort of recharge, and remember what it is that this stuff does for people. To talk to a family who named their daughter Hallelujah because of what this song meant to them at different stages in their lives is an incredibly powerful thing for me to hear, and so validating when you sometimes start to think, I've spent 20 whatever years doing this with my life, and it's not as important as it used to be, and it doesn't mean what it used to. It can still be as important as it ever has been, and I need to keep that front and center, and everybody who cares about this stuff needs to keep that front and center. The people in this room who knew me, when I was 12, 13, 14 years old, will tell you that this was the only thing that I ever really cared about, that this was the only stuff that I ever really believed in. And that, happily at Country Day, there were outlets that I could find and ways that I could utilize this in things that I was doing. I was writing about music, I was writing record reviews for The Scroll, and it's what I went on to do, writing, for the Yale Daily News when I was in college, and going straight into, straight from there into a career. When I was at Yale and I wrote my thesis about the Beastie Boys, everybody laughed at me. On campus and off. I don't know that I knew that was going to be a more directly pre-professional thing to be studying than if I was taking pre-med classes, but it has stayed a very, very straight line from very early in my youth until now. My mother, who was right here, when I was growing up, worked a few blocks from here at the Enquirer and was the dance critic there for many years. And so I really grew up with the idea with the experience that you see a performance and you digest it and you figure out what was going on and what was it that worked and what wasn't, and what ideas do you have about it, and how do you talk about that, and how do you write about that. Since music was the thing that was always most important to me, some version of that was always what I wanted to do, and pretty much always what I've done. I do live in fear of waking up one day and not wanting to do this anymore because I have no other marketable skills. But then I go through something like the Hallelujah book, have that experience, and remember, why this mattered in the way that it did, why it still matters to me in the way that it did. So I'll just run through. At Country Day, I used any excuse to write about music that I could, used any opportunity to put together dances, DJ when I could, was a DJ at WAIF radio when early in my high school years, where Rob Roy, classmate Rob Roy, is now carrying the torch and speaking into not that same microphone, thank God, but a new and improved microphone. At Yale, I was an American Studies major, concentrating in American music, and the American Studies department was very supportive of kind of an oddball way to put a major together, and was, and including being supportive of spending a year writing about the Beastie Boys, and I learned a tremendous amount there. And I think, when I was speaking to somebody for the Alumni magazine before this, and she asked what advice I had for seniors, I think the only advice that I have is to find the thing that you love and the thing that you care about most, and to spend as much time as possible learning as much as possible about that. I think wherever it is that you're going to go from there, that's the thing that's going to serve you the most, and nothing has made me change that opinion. I was fortunate enough at that time that I was sort of coming of age and then graduating at a time when hip-hop was changing what pop music and youth culture in America was all about. Music that really just started to emerge while we were in high school, stuff that we were just starting to discover while at Country Day. Became apparent that this was the most significant shift in music and the most important movement culturally since rock and roll. And that was what I loved and what I was very deeply immersed in through those years, through college and out of college. And when I went to work at Rolling Stone, when I graduated, initially an internship there before my senior year, and then when I came back after I graduated, I was fortunate enough to be there, paying close attention to what was going on in hip hop and very much in that world at a time where they were realizing that they really weren't sufficiently keeping up on that, and that they had not yet caught up enough to where the music was going, which led to a tremendous opportunity for me to sort of be able to step in and fill that role for them. It was an amazing time to be covering this music. I mean, I say that it's like what it must have been to be covering, bebop in the 40s or rock and roll in the 50s, when it's really an emerging, still very small, almost a cottage industry. And it was remarkable, the sense of community, that there were a couple of us writing about this stuff. There were a couple of record labels that were putting it out. There weren't that many artists making records. And we were all in the same, if I'd go to this club on Monday night, all the executives would be there, all the artists would be there, the couple of writers would be there, and it really all felt, like we were kind of strapped on the front of this rocket ship that was starting to take off. Hugely exciting thing to be a part of. And so at that time it meant covering, what is still considered sort of the greatest age in hip hop, and writing about Public Enemy, and writing about NWA and De La Soul and Eric B. and Rakim, and people who are now going into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And at the time were just sort of emerging up off the streets. Rolling Stone was good to me in that I was able to also do other things and write about other things that I had grown up caring about, and still could write a Neil Young cover story or a U2 cover story, or not feel completely shoehorned into one spot, which I think has is something that has long gone to serve me well. Remaining open to different musics and different sounds, and trying to figure out what would be the most exciting thing to write about at that moment. After a few years at Rolling Stone, Quincy Jones approached Time Inc., Time Warner, I don't know what they were, where in the merger they were at that time, but whatever that company was, with the idea of starting a hip-hop version of Rolling Stone, an urban response to within the music publishing world, and that magazine became Vibe magazine. I left Rolling Stone to go work on the launch of Vibe, and then after about a year took over as the editor-in-chief there. And when I took over as running that magazine, I was 27 years old, I think. I'd never looked at a budget, I'd never managed, to order dinner, I don't know. I was just, a writer who liked music, but it was sort of the way that things ended up falling was I was offered this position. And learned it, and had to take on things that are, were not the things that I most want to do in life, which is, look at spreadsheets and figure out budgets for issues and all that stuff, but I knew enough to be able to be taught how to get through that. And we had an incredible run at Vibe. I edited the magazine for about 4 years. We tripled our circulation. We went from, struggling to see if we could keep the doors open after that first year to a very healthy, what soon became approaching 1 million circulation, nominated for National Magazine Awards, just, an incredible ride, something I will not ever witness again. And really at the time when this culture and this music and this community were really taking over the world, where this was going from, subculture to mass culture, where this was going from, regional youth movement into global phenomenon. It was amazing. It was amazing to be any small part of watching that happen. It was also exhausting. And it was especially exhausting when during the last year that I was there, we had to cover, the murders of Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls. And, it was certainly important. You were certainly aware that the world was watching our coverage at a moment like that, but God, it takes a lot out of you to have to do that kind of thing and have to spend, a full weekend round the clock doing covering police investigation and conspiracy theories and whatever. One thing that was so exciting about writing about hip hop was that it did mean the opportunity to write about a lot of different things, to write about politics, to write about culture, to write about economy, to write about race relations, new and old in this country. But I was kind of starting to hit my limit at that time, and decided that I want to step away from it. Vibe had grown so much by then that we acquired Spin Magazine, which was at the time sort of the leading alternative rock magazine, and brought that under one roof together. So for a little while I worked with both magazines, kind of consulting with both. I edited a couple of books, a book about Tupac that was a very big success, a history of hip hop book, was writing for both, which I had really missed writing during the years that I was editing. And then there was some trouble at Spin, and our owner came to me and said, I know you said you don't want to edit magazines anymore, but would you consider taking this over at least enough to sort of stabilize things? And I thought about it and did that for a while, and had a alternately gratifying and frustrating number of years editing at Spin. It was in some ways kind of the inverse, where Vibe was covering a music that was very much on the rise, very much exploding, and there was more stuff and star power than we could ever possibly keep up with. Running a rock and roll magazine around the turn of the century, when Britney and NSYNC and Backstreet Boys were really where the action was, and the rock bands were just horrible. It was a real, it was very much a challenge, and it was a magazine that was, what I realized after a while was we were really defining ourselves by the things that we weren't, as opposed to the things that we were. And it was a magazine that, well, we don't, it's not a hip hop magazine, there's somebody doing that. We're not doing the big pop stars, Rolling Stones doing that. We're not, and we were really left with a very hard sense of what it was that we actually were, and why people were, what was the reason that people were turning to us, what was the reason that people would pick up this magazine. Which was an interesting sort of realization to have, just in general in life, about how you define anything, any project that you're working on, or anything that you're thinking about, and that it wasn't about, what are things that we can't do, but trying to figure out what are we actually here to do. So it was just weird. We would do some, awful but big popular rock band, and they would sell really well, and then we'd do the next one, and they would sell terribly, and then we'd do some really super cool sort of underground act, and they'd do really well, and we'd think, okay, that's what they want, we'd do that again, they'd sell terribly. Nothing was consistent, and I think we did some really good work, but I never felt like I really got a handle on what I needed to be doing there. And in the meantime, I was getting older. The music audience was getting older. The other interesting thing that was going on at that time was you also started to see, the Norah Jones record sell 10 million copies, and the Oh Brother, Where Art Thou soundtrack sell 10 million copies, and this sense of there was an emerging, I keep saying emerging, there was this growing older music fan that was looking for a different thing. So my publisher at Spin and I kind of went off and decided we wanted to try to launch our own magazine that maybe fit more where we were at that time, where our interests were at that time, and where the world seemed to be headed. And we worked on a magazine that eventually was called Tracks, that we wrote from the business plan up, that we sat down from a blank page and tried to figure out what it was, and put together, I think, a convincing enough plan, and a very solid magazine. The bulk of our funding came from about 3 blocks from here. Not from somebody that I found, from somebody that my publisher found, who sort of got behind us and let us get started. We published for about a year and a half or so, and reached the point of, okay, we got to step to the next level of investment. I think we had always been honest and clear about what it was going to require when. I don't think we tried to hustle anybody. But at that point, investors decided they didn't want to go forward with that, which, when you're dealing with independent investment, you better always be ready for that phone call to come tomorrow. And so we had to shut the magazine down. It was difficult in that I wish I'd had a little longer run just to learn a little more. It was, the things that I thought were going to be hard were hard. The things that I thought were going to be easy and that we could do were easy and we could do. And I don't think we had enough time to really see if this audience was out there or not, or what the potential was. That said, I can't imagine there's anybody who keeps themselves up at night thinking, man, I really should have sunk more money into magazine publishing in 2006 or so. This was really as the entire media world was absolutely turned upside down. And we were right at, the music industry was falling apart and the magazine industry was falling apart. So we're really right at a very healthy spot trying to launch a music magazine at that moment. And so I understand why we couldn't move forward. Very hard moment. Very hard business at any time, very hard business at that time. But when we had to close up the magazine, I had to spend some time thinking, God, I do not need to go work at a magazine right now. This is having had a vision, found a magazine, created that thing. I don't really want to go sit behind a desk at somebody else's magazine right now. And it's all part of the job that isn't fun. It's none of the stuff that is fun. It's, thinking all about how to cut budgets and do things cheap and fast, and not about how to think creatively and expansively. And I had to spend some time thinking, well, what do you like about this? If you've spent the last 15 years having magazines as the outlet for doing these, whatever it is, these things that you like about being in this world, in this environment, if you're not going to do that, then what is it you like, and what are other ways to do that? Is it that you like telling these stories? Is it that you like championing the artists that that you discover, that you want to get behind? Is it about just hanging around these guys and going to as many shows as you can? Is it about looking more at history and telling those things? And I had to spend some time thinking about if there's not one way to do that, what are the ways that I can fulfill all of these, all these ideas, all of these ambitions. And I think this is really what everybody that I know, certainly everybody that I know anywhere in the media world, has been going through the last few years, which is, even if you could put all your chips on one number, nobody knows what that number is. You can take the bet and you can try it, but everybody that I know is putting together different pieces and different projects and things that are temporary and things that are ongoing. And it really feels like a shift. And I don't know if this is true some things that I've read tell me that this is true in the economy in general, that things are much more freelance-based, project-based, temporary. But I certainly see it around me and in my own life. And so, what I've done in those last few years was really try to assemble enough work that was steady to take the anxiety away and the terror of feeding my son away, and fun. I found that through I work with a concert series on PBS called Live from the Artist Den that I know sometimes is aired in Cincinnati, sometimes not, sometimes in Dayton. It's the joys of public broadcasting, is you're never quite sure what's going to happen next week. If it is broadcasting here, the new season will start in July. Which has been really fun to learn about. I've done a lot of TV stuff, but I haven't done a lot of how do you put these shows together, and how do you edit, how do you assemble, how do you put a crew together, like what is that all about? How do you try to tell a story that way? I've sustained enough regular writing. God love my friends at MSN who have kept me steadily on a steady paycheck there. That's kind of go write whatever you want, which is the best case scenario. And kept the relationships with the New York Times and Rolling Stone and all these other places as happily intact over the years that I can keep working. But also looking at other ways to do this. Just last week in New York, we had the Country Day New York alumni reception at a place and a cause that I've gotten very involved with, an organization called Housing Works, which is the nation's leading community-based AIDS services provider. And I'm the chairman of the board of a bookstore that we run in Soho, and I've been doing a music series, benefit series for the last 10 years down through the store, and have had John Mellencamp and the Black Keys and John Mayer and Lyle Lovett and Bjork and all of these amazing people who have come through and played to help raise money for this incredible cause. And that's been a really rewarding thing for me to be able to do, to put the history that I have and the relationships that I have towards doing something to raise money to take care of people who really need help. So that's been a nice way to do this. And then, happily and oddly kind of simultaneously fell into these two book projects that I was working on back and forth over the last 2 years or so. First I had this idea, this sounds hokey and made up, but it's really not hokey and made up. I was sitting in Yom Kippur services, in our holiday services in New York, and the choir came out, holiest day of the Jewish calendar, climactic moment of the service, and the choir came out and they sang Hallelujah, this song that Leonard Cohen wrote, that Jeff Buckley recorded, that was in Shrek, that was, all of these things. And I could see, everybody knew it, and people were crying, and it was a very emotional thing. And I thought, this song is really in a different place now. this is really somewhere in the stratosphere that very few songs get to go. And just started thinking, this was the same year that Justin Timberlake had sung Hallelujah at the Haiti telethon after the earthquake. Katie Lang sang Hallelujah to open the Winter Olympics in Canada. And thinking, wow, there's something that's really going on around this song now. And as I unpeeled it back, thinking there's a trajectory around this song that is unlike anything else that I can think of. When I think of the other songs that are up in that universe, Bridge Over Troubled Water came out, and everybody got it. And it was a big, huge hit, and then a lot of people recorded it, and it was that song. Imagine came out, and everybody knew its meaning has changed, obviously, over time, and changed when John died and everything else, but everybody got right away, this is something very special. Hallelujah came out, and the record company turned the record down, and wouldn't put Leonard Cohen's album out. And then when it came out on a small independent label a few months later, nobody noticed this song. The review in Rolling Stone didn't mention this song. And it took 10 years, 15 years, 17, 18 years for the song to gain this momentum. Like a snowball roll and just going. And then all of a sudden it was everywhere. And it was in all these places, and it continues to change and transform meaning. So I thought that would be an interesting thing to spend some time thinking about. Started on my way towards writing that book. A few months into it, I got approached. I had written a story about Greg Allman for the New York Times when he had a solo record come out a couple of years ago, and then read that he was signing to do his memoir. And my agent got in touch with his manager, and we spoke and had a couple of meetings, and ended up working on Greg's story with him, which was a wild trip to spend a whole lot of time with him. It was great. This is somebody who has always been a very reluctant interview and not a, life of the party kind of rock star. I really needed to be convinced that he even wanted to do it. But once I was convinced of that, he was very committed to it and really gave up the stories that we wanted him to give up, and really was very open about all kinds of things in his life. It was a bit of a crazy sprint. We had about 8 or 9 months to do this thing, but we got it done. And it was, we were #2 on the New York Times bestseller list, and big, sold a lot of copies. Recently sold the movie rights. We'll see whatever comes of that, but hopefully something fun will. So I had to keep these two books on kind of both together on simmer for a while, which was a certain kind of a challenge. It helps when one you're writing in your voice and one you're writing in somebody else's voice. At least you remember which goes in which file. My editor for the Holy or the Broken was very understanding about letting me go off and do this other thing, since it was within the time frame when I was supposed to deliver the other. As long as I got back to it and delivered on time, he was very gracious about that. So we got it all done. And now these books are out, and now I am trying to figure out what happens next. This is when I'm happy to receive a call that says, come down and speak in Cincinnati. The response to these books was great, and I have a lot of editors interested, and it would be so awesome if I had something in my back pocket to say, that's the one I want to do. But I haven't had 5 minutes to think about that while I was getting these things done. So now is really a lot about taking meetings, seeing who's out there, seeing who wants to, who's interested in what kind of projects, on the editor's side, what they're looking for, on the Rockstar side, if there's anybody else who's looking to tell their story that I might do. One of them will settle, and in the meantime there's enough writing to be done, enough other things to be done. My 10-year-old is a wild guitar player. Started playing when he was 6. Started begging me when he was 5, started playing when he was 6, so I'm happy to have the time. Now the stakes continue to get higher for a show to be good enough that I would rather go out and watch somebody else play rather than stay home and watch him practice his guitar. So the time for that is good. And it's about, right now it's about putting these different pieces together. It's about finding ways to keep this music and this work at the center of my life, to continue to explore different ways to do that, different media to tell these stories through, and to remember, again, as all of these people so strongly reminded me while putting this book together, that in the end, music and what can be said and what can be done through music and with music is still the thing that is more important to me than anything else. That part hasn't changed. That hasn't changed since I was on Given Road. It hasn't changed since before I was there, and hopefully it will remain that way for as far into the future as I can pull it off. So I thank you for your time and your attention. That's what I've got to say, and I would love any questions or anything from you guys. Anything, anybody, somebody.
What's the difference between rap and hip hop?
Difference between rap and hip hop. Well, the real answer to that is, hip hop is a broader cultural term. Hip hop sort of encompasses the music, the style, rapping, DJs, art, sort of everything that's under that umbrella, where rap refers very specifically to what it is that somebody does, saying rhymes in a microphone. Musically, I've never been there. Some people who are very hung up on using one term or the other, or that there's kind of more of an implication that rap is a little more sort of pop, bigger, for, that's like for hip-hop records for radio or rap records. In general, it's not too useful to cut it up too fine, but I think that there is a difference between sort of the broader culture of hip-hop and the music specific of rap.
Is your Hallelujah book out?
Yes, Hallelujah book is out for a couple months. Yeah.
And I haven't read it yet, but
It's okay, I forgive you.
I have a wonderful Hallelujah pin aboard on my Pinterest account. Didn't the song first come out in the McCabe and Mrs. Miller movie?
No, Leonard did all the songs for McCabe and Mrs. Miller, but that's actually before Hallelujah. That was still in the 70s when Altman made McCabe and Mrs. Miller. And
That's what some of us are from.
yeah. No. Way back in the 70s then. No. But Hallelujah was on an album that came out in 1984. Conveniently for our graduating class, it's easy to keep straight in my mind. But again, it came out to not only under the radar, but completely off the radar. Nobody knew this song even existed when it came out.
Did that have something to do with Leonard Cohen's persona at the time?
Sure. I think. I think starting with it isn't. That version is a certain sort of dated. I mean, it's very sort of 80s synthesizers, and Leonard's, it's an acquired taste. Leonard's voice. It's not a huge pop thing. And also it was it's very easy to look back at the label and say, you guys are idiots. You turned down this record that had a song that now has 360 some different recordings out there and has become, a standard. But, it was 1984. 1984 was the summer that Born in the USA came out, Purple Rain came out, Like a Virgin came out, and it was about the biggest moment in the record business ever. And I think it's very easy to imagine they would look and say, here's this 50-year-old cult poet. Each of his last 3 records have sold worse than the one before. We got to worry about printing enough Bruce Springsteen records. We can let this guy go. So I want to be careful not to write them off completely. There are reasons that Columbia Records didn't need to focus on Leonard Cohen at that moment.
I am impressed that our little school has turned out such stars as you and the Dessner twins.
Yes.
What is it that Country Day it did for you to both help you as well as maybe not to help you so much with respect to the development of your special talent?
You'll be pleased to know that we're actually, which I didn't tell you, we're actually filming the Dessners in the National for my TV show in a couple of weeks in New York, because they have a new album coming out end of May. So I've done some other work with them over the years, but we're bringing that very closely together. I don't know, I think I guess when I think back, I think that the great opportunities for me at Country Day were because it was the size, because it is the size that it is, because everybody is involved in the way that they are. There was a sense of like, if you can come up with an idea, you can kind of go do it. And whether that meant, you know, okay, we've got the Scroll, I'll write record reviews for the Scroll, or whether that meant we were all, you know, at that point sort of rediscovering, you know, Motown records after Thriller came out and after the Motown 25 anniversary stuff and all that. I mean, we got very all into that, and we're like, well, we'll do a Motown dance. That was this huge, like everybody in the school came out to that, and it was fantastic. So I think that there was the chance to do things, to be involved. If you're interested in something, to be involved in things. I mean, obviously this has changed, that I could, turn up then and play on the basketball team. That ain't still the case, but it was the case then. That's why we were 1-19 our junior year, is that right? But you could do that stuff, and that was really, that part of it was important to me. I mean, I think it was also important, the limitations around that size and that it was, the community that it was meant that I also wanted to find, to go work at the radio station, to go find other ways to pursue this stuff that were not right there and readily available. But I think that was, it was the chance to do all of those things. And look, like anybody will ever say, it's also those handful of teachers that stay with you the rest of your life, and really, really learn it. I mean, he's long gone from the school, but for those who remember when Dick Davidson was there, the person in my life who really taught me to write, whatever it was that I was writing about, it's, that was the moment of really taking it seriously and really starting to think about how you put words together. That's when you're lucky enough to fall in with some of those, but it seems like there were a lot of those in Country Day to fall in with.
I heard you interviewed Arlo Guthrie when you were...
Yeah, I don't know if that's true. My dad was saying that was my first assignment. First big interview was talking to Arlo Guthrie when he came through town for a piece for the Scroll.